right? And hello, welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about the best things from this year for the Derpies of 2021 that happened in 2022 because it's about the previous. But before we do that, I want to tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast.
Well, on this podcast, we talk about games and we also talk about movies and we also talk about a variety of different things. And we're going to talk about that variety of different things in today's podcast. So the Derpies is our end of year cast, right? Where we go through, we talk about the year that was in games, what's the best, sometimes what's the worst, etc. Right? But crucially, there are some rules to how the Derpies works. Rule number one is that, excuse me, is that one of us will propose a category, right? And then we will answer that category on the air. Sometimes it will be specific to the year, sometimes it'll just be so that someone can shoehorn in a thing or whatever. And then the other one of us will have to answer for that category given the amount of time, right? If I propose, the category is best movie of the year, I have to talk about my best movie of the year first before passing it off to Mango. But sometimes, these are going to be complicated, category things. And so those are the rules of the Derpy. Are there any other rules to the Derpies besides that?
So the other rule is that we start with our game of the year, which, as of the past couple of years, has been split into three categories: game as sport, game as art, and game as game. And we do that up top, so most places will wait that bullshit to the end, but those are the only set categories, and so we know those ahead of time, and so we don't have to worry about things falling about coming up with answers to those.
True.
Also, a new rule, as announced in the announcement post, is because we're doing this live for the first time, or this particular episode live for the first time, right? We've been doing live all year. You guys can suggest categories, and we'll take them if any of you are here. Unlike our episode 300 spectacular, this will be time limited to an hour and a half. We will not keep going. Although if we get a really good one, I suppose we could we could extend a little further. Not that we've ever been beyond extending it a little bit, but we fill the hour and a half with our categories bouncing back and forth as much as we can. Yeah, I think that's the extent of the rules. All right, so do you want me to start or do you want to start?
I don't mind either way. Well, so we're doing game of the year, right?
Yeah, well, we're doing the 3 games of the year, right? So I think previously we've done we do game of sport and game as art first, and then we do game as game as the final one in the initial 3. So I'll just go. So my game as sport of the year, which should surprise absolutely no one, is Guilty Gear Strive. It is a pure sport game, right? This is a fighting game through and through. So much so that they have a story mode, and the Guilty Gear Lord is batshit. But it's not like in most fighting games. It's kind of like a set of matches, maybe with like scenes in between. It's just like a in-engine anime that they play in episodes, and you just watch. You could put it on a streaming service if you want. There's no interaction. That's just all the whole thing. And so it's like pure sport, right? It's pure PvP, or training mode, right? And I just kept coming back to this game. There were a couple of cool games that came out this year in this kind of space, right? Like the Nickelodeon All Stars Brawl. And I think there might have there was like another big fighting game that I did not check out. I think it's Mark of the Wolf. I don't know. There were a couple of big ones, but Strive very quickly jumped up as one of the big boy contenders, along with like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat and Tekken. And I keep coming back to it every couple of weeks. I'm like, man, I got to get some sets in, and I'll just pull out Potemkin and throw people. It is super fun. They've added a handful of very cool characters, a mix of old returning characters and new characters. And the designs are always off the wall. And the game, to me, is great because it's not a hyper fighter like, say, a Marvel vs. Capcom, where it's just like the biggest or your biggest risk as a player is dropping your combo. And it's not super slow like Samurai Showdown, which is the games I typically prefer. But there is opportunity for comboing. There's opportunity for style. There's opportunity for self-expression. Um, but it's also kind of like so enough, and there are characters that are so enough, right? Like I play like the Grappa typically fills that role. That's what I play typically. That you can get both styles of gameplay, and it's also very pretty. And I don't know what else you could ask for out of a fighting game. It's got rollback netcode. It's got all like I think it's got every single quality of life feature that you could ask for, right? Like things like hold to pause. That way you don't accidentally fuck up an entire tournament by accidentally hitting the pause button. So, all that good stuff. Buddy, what is your game of sport of the year?
Okay, so my question, do you remember what I said last year?
I do not.
I'm a little afraid I'm going to be repeating myself, but I'm going to go with this answer anyway because it's just the most honest answer. So for me, it's obviously got to be Mythic plus Dungeons in World of Warcraft, right? Which is an interesting thing because I specifically want to call out so for anybody who's listening to the podcast, right? Obviously, I've been really into WoW for honestly the last 4 years. It's been my main game for a long time now, right?
World of Warcraft has
And
definitely won a previous Derpy. I think maybe multiple times. So you're
yeah,
it is
I'm
fine to
not
repeat
surprised
this
about
reward.
that, right? And to be honest with you, I didn't mean for this to be the answer that I was giving, but it's just it is the most true game as sport that I played this year and that I think is good, and it's very good, right? I guess I don't play a ton of other games of sports, in the sense of like Hearthstone or whatever else, right? Those are kind of the only other ones. And none of those really gripped me in the same way. I don't think the Hearthstone meta was very good for what I was playing. But anyway, so about WoW Mythic Plus. This year in WoW Mythic Plus, I joined a Mythic Plus team, right? So it's me and a group of 4 other guys, right? And we created a team, and we had effectively a schedule, right? And we had roles in our group, right? As we were pushing first to 15s, right? Getting plus 15s, you do all the dungeons at plus 15, you get a mount called KSM, Keystone Master. A lot of people do this over the course of a season, whether on a team or whether by pugging. That's cool. But the thing that I did recently, and the thing that really cements this in my mind, is pushing to the plus 20 mark, right? One of the things that was added into the game is there were our special achievements for timing a key at plus 20 for all of the 8 dungeons in the game, right? And specifically getting to a rating, and that also gets you to a rating of about 2400 of Mythic plus rating or whatever. And that was sort of our goal. The way that this became, or the way that this felt sport-like to me, that I want to call out, and in a different way than sort of the way that I've talked about in previous years as a sort of PvP situation, is how it makes working on the team happen and work, right? Because Mythic Plus obviously has these different roles. You have tank, you have healers, you have melee and range DPS, right? And you also have different sorts of utility that are necessary for you out in the dungeon, right? And the thing that it reminds me most of is what it was like when I was playing Little League, for instance, right? Where I'm the first baseman, my friend Eddie is the pitcher, my friend Billy is in outfield, right? And we have these sorts of roles together, and it is less about the PvP aspect, right? About the kind of competition of beating another player, right? And it is much more about the integration of that team environment, right? And Mythic Plus is just insane at that. I also think, for what it's worth, rating is a pretty good example of that, but I'm just more into Mythic Plus than I am into rating, obviously. And I also just think that Mythic Plus is amazing in WoW right now, and rating is not. So, right, specifically for the Mythic Plus game mode, I would answer World of Warcraft for my my game as sport of the year. Okay, so this is going to be an interesting one. For game as art of the year, here's a question. How much do I have to recuse games that I've personally worked on?
Uh, I don't think. I think so long as you say I worked on this game, right? Like that's fine, right? Like, you know, yeah.
Okay, so I do want to say, I'm going to sort of give 2 answers here, which is maybe cheating, I guess, a little bit. But For a game that I worked on, which is very cool. My answer would be The Dark Side Detective: A Fumble in the Dark, right? The sequel to the original The Dark Side Detective, 6 cases, a new, bonus case. Obviously, The Dark Side Detective is basically the only comedy game I think I've ever really like had a good time with. I just feel like comedy doesn't come across super well in games, even for some of the famous ones, right? Like Saints Row or even like Borderlands, right? I appreciated Borderlands and I had a good time with Borderlands, but I more had a good time with it because it was a fun shooter than I did because it was comedic, right? But a point and click adventure game is really not all that up my alley, right? I'm not entirely interested or super into those. And the Dark Side Detective series is just so laugh out loud funny in places that I just honestly can't help myself but love those games. In particular, there's like just a bunch of really good sort of like meta bits that it reminds me quite a lot of that sort of early to 2010s. We talked about this with 30 Rock, with Community, with Parks and Rec, this kind of heightened reality. Absolutely, that's the kind of reality that the Dark Side Detective games lives in. And those are and so that would be, like my first answer. If that answer doesn't count, then my second answer would be the game Not for Broadcast, which is published by Devolver Digital, which is a game about being it's a game about being like the sound guy in a booth. Like you're like the executive producer of like a news show, right, in the 80s, and you're like switching between camera one and camera two. That game is also funny. It is fun, and I had a really good time playing it. And I think it's a really unique and interesting use of those sorts of mechanics. It actually reminds me a lot of sort of the Five Nights at Freddy's thing. You're just kind of like looking at a panel, clicking on the right things at the right time, that kind of stuff. But also the broadcast that you are broadcasting is humorous in and of itself. I just think it's less funny than the Dark Side Detective, so it technically loses. But yeah, so yep, those are my answers.
Fair enough. I'm waiting for the year when you just give all 3 awards to World of Warcraft.
Honestly, I mean, I do like the writing in World of Warcraft.
I think you
And
might
I
have given it to art. I think you might have given art to World of Warcraft at one point. It must have been like a launch
I might, I might have
expansion.
done that last year.
Yeah.
I liked the end of BFA. I actually like the stuff that's going on story-wise in Shadowlands more than that, but I don't like it more than the Dark Side Detective.
Yeah, fair enough. And for my game of art, I'm going to give it to Inscription, which I believe is also published by Devolver Digital.
That's
Um,
true.
I spoke about this on the cast, and this is a slightly interesting one for me because I really enjoyed the game and I thought the story was pretty neat. But I notably thought the gameplay got worse as the game went on, like notably worse. It's by the same guy who did,
Interesting.
I think it was Pony Island. But essentially, the game has like 3 kind of iterations on it, and the first one is the best. Um, and on it, it looks like the structure of the game indicates that like maybe there was supposed to be 2 more, and like he ran out of time, or like he's also known for like adding things later, so maybe it'll come in later. Um, but the story was super interesting. I always find the his games to be interesting because there's always an element of he'll like add something that you have to like modify a file or like do something exogenous to the game in order to figure out like the true story or whatever. Um, and apparently this game was so popular that like the website he set up to like mail like 4 people the copy of like the secret got slammed, like just got slammed within like a couple of days. He's like, stop submitting forms. I don't have enough like of whatever to send out. So good for him. Success wise. And I personally don't have the patience to follow up on all that real world stuff. But something I did want to comment on is, unlike some of the games I've given this to in the past, this is kind of unapologetically a game, right? Whereas, like, I feel like a lot of this category tends to capture like um, less gaming games and more kind of like either walking simulators or like even Return of the Obra Dinn, which I absolutely adored, was relatively light on mechanics. This game is heavy on mechanics. It is, like I said, a very gamey game. And so I think this is notable in that like I have always said that I think we give games writing a pass when it's mostly mediocre because games don't because games just haven't had super great writing and kind of rely on the fact that you're invested via interaction rather than having um, super great writing. And this is a game with the opposite problem. It is great writing, but the game itself isn't super great. I found myself plowing through, um, plowing through. Sorry, for those of you at home that are listening, our friend Akshay has typed in the chat Death Stranding game of the decade. Um, so it's thrown me off my cadence. But Inscription is my game as art, and I guess that'll lead into my game of the year, which frankly I realized as we were setting up that I picked a game that came out in 2020, so I had to change it last minute. But it is the only game that I finished this year besides Inscription, which was, and I absolutely adored it too, and that was Grime, published by Akubara Games.
What? Well, you look at that. Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually planning on originally giving this game best Metroidvania of the year with like a big fuck you to Metroid Dread. Um, and I did like Metroid Dread, but I thought Grime just did it better, right? Like,
Sure.
uh, Dread had some like loading problems, and like I also liked Grime because like there's the Souls like combat, lots of stats, lots
Mhm.
of stuff to toy around with. Obviously, the developers care a whole lot. I didn't like dive deep into the Discord, but I watched some of those conversations go by. I saw the changes happen live because I was playing right around when like one of the earlier patches dropped. And I thought it had some flaws and it had some rough edges, but like I said, there's no other like there's games I played more this year, probably World of Warcraft, but like there's no other game that I sat down and played front to back and didn't put down. Like I said, except for Inscription, and I didn't like Inscription that much. I liked Grime a lot, so or I didn't like Inscription's gameplay that much. I love Grime's gameplay a lot, and yeah, so that's my game of the year, buddy. What is your game of the year?
You know, normally I feel like I have a really hard time with this one because a lot of the games that I'm playing every year are not coming out this year, right? Like except from in the before times that I'm just like picking up or whatever. But I was in the very unique position of I've played a lot of games this year, right? Like, because I actually went back and looked over it. There are games. This is maybe a year where I followed new releases closer than I have in the past. I have games in here that's like Humankind, which was a brand new release. New World was obviously a brand new release. All-Star Brawl was in here, Outriders was in here, all of, as these these new releases games that just came out in 2021 that I picked up and played. But the one that really stood out for me, and I kind of had forgotten because it was from the very beginning of the year, is Valheim. And so Valheim is what's going to get my game of the year, which is interesting because I haven't even played it since the big gigantic update. And I also never even beat the final boss. But for the duration of playing Valheim, right, which was, it wasn't in the beginning, it was in the middle of the pandemic, right? But just like it was deep in the pandemic, we were all in quarantine. This was before the vaccine was available, right? There was really nothing that gripped me in the way of just like yanking me into an experience and immersing me in it so much so that I was just like constantly obsessing about it. It was always in the back of my mind. Oh, I need to do this. I need to get more of that. I want to make a thing, and we got to make portals to this and that. We were playing on a big server with a bunch of people, a bunch of our WoW friends, obviously. um and that server had a whole bunch of like cool builds on it, right? Like going out and going sailing with a group of people to go raid a swamp to cart home as much iron. It's just like it's one of those perfect interactions, right? That I just have not had in gaming in a really long time. And so even though I have not touched the game in however many months, right? Probably in 8 months or so. And I'm pretty sure that server is long dead, right? Like I can't even go back to salvage that stuff if I were want to, or maybe I could if I asked somebody, that kind of thing. It was just like the best experience of the year. And so, also, even though I'm very much in the same boat, like I definitely played more World of Warcraft than I did Valheim, or really any other game. I'm sure, my hours in WoW this year were really depressing if I were to actually take a look at them. But yeah, so for me it is Valheim. That's my game of the year for sure.
All right, awesome. Funnily enough, the game that kind of sticks out in my head as being similar to that is like New World. But I just fell the hell out of that game. Just like after like a month or two, it just went away. At least for me. Um, but now we're going to move into custom categories. And reminder for those at home, since I see you've got some new people that popped in, this year you could suggest categories, we will answer them. But in the kind of traditional mirror back to back, did you want to take the first custom category, buddy?
Yeah, so I want to take the first custom category and I want to make this one an easy sort of bookend to sort of fill out the, how we've talked about games this year. And uh my final sort of game of the year category that I want to talk about is biggest gaming disappointment of the year, right? So as compared to game of the year, this is basically my worst of the year category. Though I don't want to say worst, right? This is less about the quality of the game itself and more about, sort of the way in which I personally interfaced with this game, with this interaction. There's actually a couple of contenders up here that I want to audit. I want to skirt a fine line a little bit, and emphasize that I actually think that the game that I'm about to list here is a pretty good game and is probably better than the other top contender that I have a feeling you might end up naming, but we'll see. But it's the thing that pointed out as I was looking over the stuff that came out this year that I was just like, oh yeah, I really had hopes for that one that did not pan out in the way that I was hoping they would. And the answer for that is Outriders. Outriders is the looter shooter that was created by Square Enix. And it was in many ways the looter shooter that I always wanted to play, right? And it was giving me big Anthem vibes, right? Rest in pepperonis, my baby Anthem that I love and miss every day, right? Um Outriders does the thing where the gunplay is mostly sort of an auto attack thing, right? You are using your abilities, you're using your abilities more or less on cooldown, and you're filling the downtime with attacks from your weapons, right? And your weapons have certain properties, your armor has certain properties. Those things are synergistic and create kind of synergistic sort of like builds or whatever, right? There's crafting. It is very much like a core looter shooter, like Destiny or any of the other names that are trying to chase Destiny's big money, right? The core thing that makes it a disappointment for me is the story and the world. The world of Outriders is batshit insane, and it was so hard to grasp and get into that I basically fell off of it almost for that reason. I actually think that the gameplay of Outriders is, it's fine to good. I had a couple of situations that, I think some of the enemy designs are not great, and the patterns are a little repetitive, but I do like the actual play of the game itself, right? The different classes have really different feels, and that's neat and that's interesting. The different ways that you can customize your classes and create different builds is also really neat and interesting. I was playing like the Earth geomancer kind of character. We did a whole episode on Outriders. I guess I won't belabor this point too much. But I think the thing that really drove me away from Outsiders was just the incomprehensibility of the story moving from plot point to plot point. If you were to ask me to summarize what happened, I don't think I could fucking tell you, right? It was just inscrutable. And at the end of the day, I do think that part of that is required in order to get me on board with a gaming experience like that one. So that's it. Biggest gaming disappointment of the year, Outriders. What's yours?
All right. So interestingly, I think I know what you think the other one is going to be. What was your other one? Just out of curiosity.
New World.
Interesting. Okay. Because that is not my is that actually did a lot better than I thought it was going to do. So I'm not going to give it to that.
Okay. Yeah, I actually think New World is a worse game than Outriders, by the way. And the only difference in the two of those is that I had higher hopes for Outriders than I did for New World. New World, I basically picked up on a lark, it was just I was bored. People were into it, and I just wanted to give it a shot. We said we were going to do an episode on it. I didn't really have high hopes for it. I'd been following the news, and I didn't think that it was anything special. So it didn't have that far to fall. Whereas Outriders, I was pretty hyped for. After my first however many hours playing the game,
Yeah, no,
and yeah.
no, that makes perfect sense. I similarly did not have higher hopes for New World, but I think New World's a better game than Outriders. But
Interesting. Wow.
yeah.
Okay.
So question for the category: Does it have to? Is it worst gaming or most disappointing gaming experience, or is it like?
Oh, interesting.
Or is it?
Like, could it be?
They have a very specific
I was
experience that I
thinking
think.
most disappointing game, but if you want to make it most disappointing experience, I'm down for that. That's
Okay,
interesting.
because I have a very specific thing that happened. So
Okay.
around the middle of the year, I was very bored. I was like, I want to shoot some stuff and loot some stuff, and Destiny's not in a great place. So I'm going to reinstall Borderlands 3 and buy like the director's cut, right? This will be a
Mhm.
lot of fun, right? So I did. I installed the director's cut. I booted it up. I created a new character, and I discovered that at some point in the past 2 years, they had removed the ability to remap the emote keys, which are on the arrow keys, which long-term people will know is how I move in games because I'm left-handed and I use the mouse on the left-hand side of the keyboard. And normally, like I might have been able to go and like remap them manually using a config file, but I was so disgusted that I literally Alt F4 and uninstalled the game. And that was that was my most disappointing gaming experience of this year.
Wow. You know what? That's very fair. That's a good one.
Yeah, the worst part too was they let me map the movement keys on them, and like because like it took me like 15 minutes to realize what was happening because you would like it would move and the movement would cancel the emote, right?
Mhm.
But every time I tried to reload and move, the emote would cancel the reload animation.
Oh
And
my god.
yeah, and so like it's like it's not a thing that like it wasn't immediately unplayable, but it was like definitely well I can't do this. You can't like not move and reload, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just it was like I said it was so disgusting that I was just like fuck this, right? Like
Man.
so yeah.
Randy Pitchford, what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah, every time I see an ad for fucking like the fantasy game that's like set in like it's like it's their new game that's coming out that's like technically set inside of Tiny Tina's um D&D game, but it's like a new game. It's like Fantasylands or something like that.
I don't know the answer to that actually, but
Okay.
okay.
Yeah. Every time I see that for them, I'm like, never again. I'm just not gonna. I'm not gonna do this again. Not gonna do this to
Fair,
myself.
fair enough. I appreciate how like petty that answer is. I mean, like it's like it's like if I had given it to Total War Warhammer 3 because they delayed the release date from 2021 to 2022. Which, like, honestly, thinking about it, maybe is my most disappointed gaming experience of 2021.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm gonna defend myself a little bit there, like for people who are like worse off than me, that is like a real accessibility issue, right? Like
Yeah,
not being able to remap
absolutely.
certain keys. So like, you know, like that is the one thing that keeps me from feeling too bad about every time I bitch about bad key remappings. Is that's like a real problem for people rather than just like weird left-handers like me. Um,
Yeah.
so you know, I feel justified in bitching all I want about that. Um, so I guess I'll end that topic, and I'm gonna say so. I'm gonna be cagey about the topic, like as is so many years, right? Like this is an answer in seeking a category, and I don't want to hem you in too much. So I'm gonna say this is the best story I experienced this year, and that was Hyperion, which is it's a very old book. I listened to it on
Okay.
Audible, so you know, story is what I'm going with. That I'm not gonna hem it to either category, but it is a relatively famous book. Like I said, 1989. Fairly what's the word of it's one of those books where you read it and you're like, you know, oh this is great, and then you realize it was written in 1989. You're like, oh, he predicted a bunch of stuff, right? Like you know, he's talking about like he like uses this term world web like a couple of months before that term is like coined and used like the World Wide Web. And
Okay.
um, it's super interesting. It's basically it's the common comparison is to the Canterbury Tales. It's 6 people on a pilgrimage to this planet with this pain god essentially, um, as kind of like the parts of the world are collapsing in around them, and it's just the 6 of their stories told over the course of the book, um, and it's super compelling. Um, it's one of the few books that like I would listen to when I didn't need to be doing something else. Like I just wanted to listen to the book. Great book for driving because like, or alternatively, a great and a terrible book for driving. Great because you don't like, notice that you're driving. Bad because like if you need to pay attention to the road, sometimes you miss it. Right? Like that. Like at least one near miss with this book, because I was paying too close attention to the story and not enough to the road. Um, and just like also a variety of like styles. Like each character has their own style and kind of like motion to it. I would also highly recommend the Audible performance. They got like 6 different voice actors to voice the 6 different stories. And some parts that were just like incredibly heart wrenching. Like one of the stories is spoilers for Hyperion. One of the pilgrims, his daughter or the character's daughter was investigating, like doing research on this planet because there's some weirdness about it. Um, and she essentially catches Benjamin Button disease, and it's just him describing how he watches his like she was doing like master's work, watches her like regress, like, and she's a baby at present time in the book, and like, you know, it's incredibly sad. And like it's not Benjamin Button in the sense that she's just aging backwards. She like regresses a day and like thinks that like that day is the day, like, if like the day she turns 12, she thinks the day before was the day the day before her birthday or whatever, right? So like she keeps forgetting things. There's a scene where like her boyfriend, like she crosses the moment where she would have met him, right? So like she doesn't know who he is anymore. And he's like finished his doctoral thesis and like, is come back to check on her as like a little girl. It's it's a very touching story. And there's 5 of these, and I think they're all pretty good. The last one I think not the best. And the guy has some idiosyncrasies, but it was a great story, and I highly recommend it. And I'm starting to dig into Fall of Hyperion, which is the sequel. Um, yeah, that's my best story of the year, or story that I experienced this year.
My best story of the year, and this one I can't even actually explain because it's a spoiler for anyone in the chat that I highly encourage doing this thing. But it is for, and this is going to sound wild, I understand, but it is for specifically the video Patrick Explains the OC and Why It's Great on the YouTube channel Patrick H. Willems. Okay. I've talked about this YouTube channel in the past. He won my for Derpies 2019. No, 2020. He won my best like YouTube like YouTuber, like best YouTube video, or maybe like best influencer, I call it something like that, right? And and the thing that he won it for at the time was the talk show arc, which was, quarantine started when he was visiting his parents. His parents live in upstate New York. He lives in New York City. He was visiting his parents for a weekend, and he was in upstate New York, and that's when quarantine started in New York City. And he was like, "Oh, well, I could just stay with my parents, right? I can take this weekend trip to be a couple of weeks. Quarantine will blow over, and the pandemic will blow over, and I'll go back to my apartment." And then spent the next 6 months like hidden away in his parents' house in upstate New York because the pandemic just didn't blow over. Quarantine didn't end. And he was stuck in this like sunk cost fallacy of like, well, obviously I can't leave now. So that was why Patrick won it last year, right? And during the course of this year, his character created a talk show, and the talk show was the sort of the framing device for these individual YouTube video essays, right? That framing device has actually been going for the last 2 years over the course of his last like 35 videos, right? Every video is bookended in the beginning and the end with just like a little short narrative, you know, sort of tongue-in-cheek. It's comedic, it's humorous, right? We've talked about the biopics episode that they did. That one also had a narrative framing device where it's like Patrick was going through the music biopic formula, but as a video essayist, where he like got hooked on drugs and then started video editing or whatever. And so like this is something in his videos. In the episode, Patrick explains the OC and why it's great. One of the singular best plot twists I have ever in my life experienced happens. And I was so fucking blown away that it happened to me in the narrative framing device of a YouTuber's video essays that it has to be the answer to this one.
Better than the Defunct Land twist.
The Defunct Land twist. So the Defunct Land twist is a little bit different. The Defunct Land twist is also great, right? And it is a plot twist, but it is a non-fiction plot twist. Whereas the Patrick Explains plot twist is specifically a narrative plot twist inside of the story of the framing, the framing device of the videos. And it was just executed so well. We are all eagerly awaiting the season finale of Patrick's whole, story arc. It started in 2019. With a season premiere, right? The season premiere is Patrick comes back. Patrick famously burnt out at the end of 2019. He like didn't do anything for 2 months. He like booked a trip to the fucking Bahamas and didn't talk to anybody. And he came back from the Bahamas with a coconut with 2 googly eyes on it, and the coconut is his best friend Charles, and that's just continued through like all of these other video essays, right? Plus he works with a couple of other people, right? Like there are other members of this cast or whatever. The season finale was like supposed to come out, I think 4 months ago, 3 months ago, and it has instead ballooned into a literal feature film. And he's just ended up making a feature film that is all wall to wall. No video essays in this one. Is wall to wall narrative. That is ending the story of Patrick and Charles and all of the stuff that's been going on over the course of the season. So yeah, that's my answer.
Very cool.
Anyway, related to this field, because it's a good one. Every year, we obviously spend a lot of time watching YouTube, and it feels like every year the art of the video essay gets better and better and better. And there are some real contenders for this one, but I want to but I want to bring back this fan favorite category. What is the best video essay of 2021? There's a couple of honorable mentions in here that I actually really do want to talk about. Specifically, the most recent ContraPoints video on Envy is insanely good. As well as a video made by hold on. Now I want to look it up in particular. So I'm making sure that I'm not like misquoting it. A video made called the Nostalgia Critic and the Wall by Folding Ideas. Folding Ideas, by the way, famously won last year for me for his video In Search of a Flat Earth, which talks about the intersection of flat earthers and QAnon supporters, and was just like riveting for what it was. He did a breakdown of Doug Walker's inability to understand the Pink Floyd movie The Wall, and it is one of the most brutal, like it's honestly it's insanely good, but it's incredibly brutal. But the one that's got to take the cake for me this year is a 2.5-hour deep dive into the 8-season CW show The Vampire Diaries by Jenny Nicholson. I don't know why. I've never watched the fucking Vampire Diaries. The Vampire Diaries could not possibly cross my radar as a show that I would spend however many gazillions of hours watching. But for some reason, that 2.5-hour video essay that Jenny Nicholson did is so fucking funny that I must have watched it 20 times over the course of the last year. I just watched it over the course of the weekend, actually. I was just sitting in Minecraft, farming cobblestone, and listening to Jenny explain to me the ridiculousness that is the Vampire Diaries. I think Jenny Nicholson's, particular delivery style is also pretty good. She also has a video that came out recently about Dear Evan Hansen, but for my money, the magnum opus has to be her incredibly in-depth breakdown of the Vampire Diaries as the best video that came out in 2021. So
Yeah.
What's yours?
So mine is probably gonna have because I watch a lot of YouTube, right? And there's probably like a couple of things that I really enjoyed watching this year, but don't really fall into the video essay format. So I will respect the category. I'm gonna say it's got to be that Defunctland video. Um,
Okay.
it's like the on the intricacies of FastPass, which just like for me hits this like very kind of like nice intersection because I've watched a bunch of his other videos too since then, and I like them, but I don't like them nearly as much as his fastest one. It's this intersection of like like there's a narrative through line to it, and there's like good solid analysis of like real world measurable problems, right? Like a lot of video essays, for better or for worse, are like subjective things, right? They're like
Yep.
talking about like plot elements of shows, which is fine, but like something that like I really like is just like dude literally sits down and like does numbers on like lines, right? Like and like cites research and talks about like all this stuff, which you know super interesting. I'm surprised that like I would be surprised if there wasn't somebody at Disney whose like job it is to figure this stuff out. Um, but like insights into that kind of thing is like I love these kinds of videos, right? Like Tom Scott usually does like 5 minute videos on like some particular weird thing out in the world. But just like a large solid chunk of time dedicated to explaining the intricacies of the fastpass system, why it's necessary, what its effects are, what like the problems are when like when the the money people come in and don't like fully appreciate like the actual problem it was trying to solve and just like see it as like a profit vector, and how that like ends up making things like not as good, like the kind of like the kind of like emergent properties of like the inherent problems of of things of like trying to like specialize things. Like there's like so this is something I sent to you pretty specifically on Twitter, but like there is a moment in there where he basically says like instead of trying to like shape behavior, we should just kind of like let the market decide things. And he didn't say it in those words, but I like recognize the form. I'm like, wow, that's like I don't think he realizes what he's saying, but that's essentially what he's saying, right? Like, if we just like let people like, do things by incentives instead of like trying to set up an incentive, because when you set up an incentive game, which is essentially what the fast pass thing is, people
Yep.
figure out how to game the system. And just like watching that happen, I thought was like super beautiful just to like see that all happen in front of me and have it so well explained and like with the numbers
It
to back
honestly,
it.
I talked about this before as a reflection of game design because I think that it has the something that designers will talk about from time to time is the problem of over designing a thing, right? Where you have a problem and you famously want to correct the thing and you over design a solution to it, right? You create this whole new framework to layer on top of the thing that just makes it even more complicated and even worse. There's a million examples of this. I'm trying to think, what are some good examples off the top of my head? Maybe reforging in WoW is a good one, right? There was the problem of people needing hit and expertise in WoW, and so they created a system that allowed you to tailor your secondary stats. So you could, if you were over the hit cap, you could take a little bit of that hit and make it into something useful like crit or haste or whatever. But then it just became doing incredibly esoteric math all the fucking time to figure out, oh well, if I drop a little bit of hit on this item and then put a little bit of hit on that item, I specifically hit like the in particular number. It's a fucking nightmare, right? And it's just like maybe the answer is to remove hit and expertise as stats, which is what they famously did. They got rid of hit and expertise, and the game is a lot better, right? And I just feel like Fast Pass documentary was such like a just like a fantastic breakdown of that problem happening in real time, and also like in a world that I don't think of it as happening, because in a certain sense, I think games are systems designed to be solved, right? Like the point of a game like WoW or League of Legends or whatever, right, is to present a player with a variety of systems and ask them to master them, right? Nobody fucking designed Fast Pass to be put in front of customers and say, master this. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So to see that kind of thing happen spontaneously, completely unrelated from gamers, was pretty fucking funny and interesting. So
Yeah.
that's a good one.
Yeah. No, and it was and like On top of that, just kind of like the other part of this too is just like, well, now people are invested in the system, they don't want to give it up, right? So if we get rid of it, it'll cause its own like backlash, right?
Yeah.
Like, um, and so funnily enough, and this is more of an aside than anything. I was thinking about how like this expansion for WoW, all the items have like set stats on them,
Yep.
which funnily enough, like in because I started playing Destiny 2 recently this year, so it doesn't get into any of the awards for this year, but or for last year rather. But like famously, that game had set drops like when the game launched and had to change to random drops to get people to like want to play the game more, which is super interesting. I feel
Yeah,
like there's
WoW
been
did the opposite of that,
yeah,
right? They
exactly.
had random drops and people were so angry about it that WoW just said everything is set in stone. I mean, it's crazy to see this stuff happen in action. People are angry about like the Archivist Codex in WoW, right? Which is the system by which you grind out a currency that allows you to put gem slots on items, right? But 3 years ago, if I were to go to like the WoW subreddit and ask people what their biggest complaints about the game are, they would say it's bullshit that certain items can get sockets and like the sockets are just fucking random. All I want is a way, and you can make the grind as hard as you want, right? Just let me grind it out so that if I get a piece of BIS gear, I can put a fucking socket on it, right? And now you have people complaining about that exact thing having taken place, which is just like, I think it's interesting to watch that happen over time in communities because it's pretty fucking common.
Yeah, I feel like we could do a whole episode on that, like that kind of thing happening because I've got more thoughts there, but this is probably not the show for it. But we should
Sure.
definitely table that for an episode at some point. But I will go on to my next category, and I'm going to keep it pretty simple. Another best kind of category. I'm going to go best album, and for me that was Screen Violence. Sorry, oof, it looks like I took you by
Woof,
surprise.
man. Yeah, what the fuck is the best album I listened to this year?
Um, Screen Violence. I've talked about this before. I've talked about this several times, right? Because I think we talked briefly about a Spotify, um, wraps at the end of one of the episodes. But Screen Violence is a new Churches album that came out this year. Churches with a V. Um, and I thought it was a really great return to form for them. I just found I still find the song super compelling. It's one of my go-to kind of like things to listen to when I'm just kind of like looking to fill some time. Recently, the director's cut came out with 3 more songs on it, which I also think are bangers. So I don't know what it is, but just like it just hit me like in such a way where like there's a lot of emotion in the songs, and like when I like listen to like the specific lyrics, they're not things that I particularly relate to, but if I just kind of like take it in the abstract, like there's a lot of emotion there that just kind of like really like burrows into me, and that I really enjoy. And like I said, I've been listening to it on repeat. This and the Inside album, which would have been a fantastic runner up, um, and may feature elsewhere in this podcast.
All right, that's perfect. That's actually gives me the answer that I needed. Yeah, so the way that I listen to music isn't very album related, right? Which is I go almost entirely off my Discover Weekly, which just shows me random songs, right? And so I have a lot of songs that I've discovered over the course of the year that I think are great or whatever. But it's very rare for me to listen to albums. The real albums that I listen to most commonly, and I listen to them all the time, are the albums for the Akupara games because I have to edit the soundtrack videos and play through and like previews. I have to do a lot of stuff with that, so I'm just listening to it a lot as I'm editing these videos, and trying to figure out like, ooh, well, what goes under like this track or this trailer or whatever else, right? But the best answer there is obviously Inside. The Inside album is so good, honestly. Just from like a musical perspective and just from how much it just owned my headspace for those like 2 months, right? And even after that, I still find myself like singing some of the like some of the songs, right? Like White Woman's Instagram, or I Feel Like Shit, or I think that song is just called Shit, right? That it's probably going to be something of a mainstay for more or less like the future, I guess, of I don't know, of things. I know that the one that everybody went crazy for was Jeffrey Bezos, because I guess it went like viral on TikTok, but it's funny that I kind of feel like that's not the best one, and it's also the one that I probably connect to the least, all things considered. I'm just trying to like look. What do I think my favorite song?
Yeah, I think Jeffrey Bezos worked um because it was just like very TikTokable. Like I think that's
Yeah.
like entirely it.
Oh, Problematic is my favorite song,
Okay.
right? Problematic, but I mean, there's so many of these that are good, right? Like Comedy, How the World Works, Problematic, even just Unpaid Intern. This is a 30-second song. Oh, I love it. I love it so much.
What
Oh,
comes with
hey,
the
by the
internet?
way, we just got a category in the chat. This is perfect because we're at the end of our category, right?
Yeah.
Hey yo, Derps, love you both dearly. You should do the category. What was your favorite item slash power up from a game from 2021?
Hmm. So this is interesting. Um Freedom slash power up. That's huh.
An
Oh,
easy answer for this one, so I can answer it, but do
go
you want to
for it.
go?
No, you go for it. You
Okay.
go for it.
For me, the answer is Jathis. Jathis, which is a weapon in World of Warcraft. I'm sorry, hold on. Jathis, the Prison Blade. Jathis actually has a very cool story behind it, and it's designed by a friend of mine, Patrick Scarborough, right? Um, he joined the WoW team this year and he put in a bunch of, he put in a bunch of weapons. But I just think that Jathis itself is an insanely cool weapon and incredibly well designed. And I was maybe the thing that I was just like happiest picking up all year, in terms of just like a game having a cool item that I wanted to have. The answer to what that item was Jathis. The way Jathis works is when he drops and is a regular old item. He's a sword. He has crit, he has haste, right? But he has a very special on use ability that says that you can feed him other weapons, right? And so if you have an epic weapon in your inventory, you use Jathis on that weapon. Jathis will eat that weapon, lose a little bit of his stats, right? So he'll lose his crit, he'll lose his haste. But he'll gain what's called a cantrip, which is like a proc, right? A cantrip is just like any non-stat thing that comes on an ability, like a trinket, but not a trinket, right? And at first the cantrip is like, Jathis has a low chance to, like strike at an enemy's weak point and do a low amount of damage, right? And as you feed Jathis more and more weapons and he loses more and more crit and haste, that proc gets better and better and better. The cantrip gets stronger and stronger until he is at his final form. Where I honestly want to read out because even the tooltip I think is incredibly well written. Let's take a look. Can I see Jathis rank 5, please? What is the tooltip on Jathis rank 5? God, I don't see the tooltip, unfortunately. But it just has this cool thing of like Jathis seeks out and strikes a weak point, right? In a target, which reminds me of the Vorpal Blade. Do you know the Vorpal Blade? It's that thing that goes snicker snack. It cuts off
Oh,
the head of the
you
Jabberwock.
yeah. I know, yes. Yeah, from
Okay.
the Lewis
In the
Carroll
comic
quote.
book
Yeah.
Fables, right, which is about the idea that all these fables are, all these public domain stories, Red Riding Hood, Little Boy Blue, all these things, are the big bad wolf. They are all like a secret, magical society, kind of like the Matrix, like living in our world or whatever. The Vorpal Blade features in that, right? Where one of the characters, Boy Blue, who is this like mild mannered office clerk, but like secretly a huge fucking badass, he goes on this mission to kill like the emperor of the enemy empire, right? All by his lonesome. And his thought is that the Vorpal Blade, because it always cuts off somebody's head with going snicker snack or whatever, that'll do it. Obviously things don't go according to plan. I'm not going to spoil that for anybody, but it's just like Jathis it's flavorful, it's mechanically complex, it's cool, it's a chase item, right? It's this kind of item that I want to spend my time killing bosses to get, which to be frank, I haven't felt that in a long time in World of Warcraft in the way that I have in Shadowlands, just because I think the items have been better designed recently than they have been in previous expansions. And so my answer for that one has got to be Jathis.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I want to give a shout out, an honorable mention to Phalanx Stomp, just because that's like super. I find that super fun, but I think technically that came out in the previous year.
Yeah, it's technically 2020, right?
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I will say my favorite power up. It's also like maybe not a power up, but like my favorite power up for 2021 is the grapple hook from Halo Infinite. Um, there is just something. So one, in the campaign, you can upgrade it so that like you can like hyper punch something if you grapple it, and it's just like so satisfying to do over and over again.
Mhm.
But in multiplayer, in a very similar way, like just because of like the level of skill it takes, right? Like you hit someone with the grapple hook and you zoom to them, and like for me, it's like 25 to like 50% of the time the person kills me before I get to them. But it's just so satisfying to like zoom in on someone and fucking hit them, right? Especially if you've got like a hammer or a sword, you're just like zzz, boom, right? Like it is, oh, perfect. And like I said in the campaign, it's got like that increased utility. And also, like it doesn't have the same it's not like a pickup. It's just like a thing you have. So for
Mhm.
traversal, it's super fun. There's some great videos of people who like you you use a rocket launcher on like a warthog and you send it flying and then you grapple the warthog and you just like fly across the map. Um which is in the grand tradition of like Halo physics exploits, which is like not a thing that I don't know if you ever played this like back in like Halo 2. You could, you know how like you dash with the sword when the reticle's red, you do
Yep.
like a lunge. So for whatever reason, that was like apparently linked to like the reticle, like whatever like turn the reticle red, right? Like that like range. So like you could take a rocket launcher out, and as you switched fast enough to the sword, you could dash as far as like a rocket launcher, and you just like see people fly across the map, right? That's like an old Halo 2 bug. Um, but that is like that kind of thing, alive and present in Halo because of unintended interactions in stuff. But like I said, um, on top of like the kind of like our harpooning stuff, it's just like a super great mobility item. It's great for like getting out of tight spots and adds a level of mobility to Halo that doesn't completely fuck with it, like some of the earlier iterations have. Right, like sprint is always controversial in these games. Sprint's very toned down in Infinite, and the grapple hook, by nature of being a pickup and having a limited number of charges, allows you to put some mobility in the game without necessarily totally screwing it over or screwing with the cadence of the game is maybe a better way to put it. So that is that's my favorite item of 2021. Thank you for the suggestion, King Fod. I believe it is your category though, so I will pass it back to you.
Okay, yeah, it is definitely my category. What do I want to do with my category? Okay, so what I think I want to do is the hmm. I think what I want to do is my the category is the movie that affected you most.
Okay.
Yeah, the movie that affected you most in 2021, right? And the reason I phrase it this way is because I don't think that this is the best movie of 2021, and I don't think that it's my favorite movie of 2021. So this is one of those answers in seeking of a category, but I just can't end the year without highlighting this one. And the answer was F9, the Fast and Furious.
Wow, I thought you were doing all this caging for fucking Matrix.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Matrix loses. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Matrix loses to the Fast and the Furious 9. Like I just can't. F9 came out in June or July of this year, like in the middle of the year. The pandemic was still going on, but we were all vaccinated, right? But F9 got me to cry 7 times over the course of watching it. Like it just hit me where I live. I do think that the Matrix and F9 are very interesting. Like I tweeted about this the other day that like there's a weird it's a weird trilogy of movies this year, which is like creators coming back to properties that they originated to kind of like fix them, right? So you had Lana Wachowski in The Matrix, you had F9 with Justin Lin coming back after 2 movies away, and you had the Snyder Cut all come out this year, right? And I think the Snyder Cut might be my favorite movie of the year, and I think the best movie of the year is probably something a little bit different. But for F9, it's just like it just hit me where I live. It just hit me so fucking hard, you know? The guys from the Tokyo Drift movies show up, and they were so ignored in all of the other Fast and Furious movies. The only person from Tokyo Drift, I'm like getting like a little choked up talking about it. The only movies from Tokyo Drift, or the only person from Tokyo Drift that ever got any love was Han, and Han was fucking awesome. Han is the best, by the way. But the guys from Tokyo Drift, not only do they help out the main Fast and Furious crew, right? They get invited to the barbecue at the end of the movie, and they see that Han is there, and they give him a hug because they think he died, right? And it's just like, oh my god, I can't even explain. It just hit me where I live. So yes, this is maybe the most specific category. Best ninth installment in the main storyline of a franchise would also have gotten me there. But movie that affected you most. That is what that's the category. What's your answer?
Okay. For ninth installment of the franchise, I think I could make a case that No Way Home fits into that slot. If you count the 3 Tobey Maguire films, the 2 Will Garfield movies, and Into the Spider-Verse, and there are 3 Marvel Spider-Man movies. But I'm not going there. I'm gonna go with the movie that most affected me. And I'm going to go back to something we've talked about, which is Inside. I don't know if it quite counts as a movie, but it's an hour. It's hour and a half format on Netflix, so I'm going to count it. Um, I think it's probably the best thing to capture the feeling of being locked inside during the pandemic, right? Like, if and when we have kids and we want to explain to them what that was like, I'm going to go point them to Inside and be like all the insanity that's coming off of him, that was like my life at some point in time, right? Like, and I was about, I wasn't quite the same age as him, but I was like around that same age, right? Like, like if you want like the perfect intersection of millennial ennui and dealing with this world affecting pandemic. So, and you talked about how the songs are great too. Things that just like really kind of like spoke to me, right? Like Turning 30 is like, I think Welcome to the Internet might be my favorite song, but Turning 30 is the one I belt out every time it comes on. Because, like, even though I'm a couple years past it at this point, I am definitely kind of in that mindset of like, well, I'm too old to be young, but I'm not old enough to be old. I'm just kind of here. And that's that, I guess. Right? And it really spoke to me in that way. And as did most of the rest of it. And so I got to give it to Inside by Bo Burnham.
That's a good answer. That's a very good answer that I like quite a lot.
All right. I guess it is my my category. Best game I returned to in the year that I'd put off for a while, and I'm going to give that to Crusader Kings 3. A couple months ago, I was just like, you know what I want to do? I want to enact the Dane Law. And so I went and I started playing as like some small Swedish or so small Scandinavian country, and proceeded to not do that and just have to deal with like the eternal clusterfuck that is Crusader Kings 3. In terms of like clusterfuck, not in terms of the game itself, but like just like things happen, you can't control them, and the game is playing catch up with like whatever disaster is happening at your feet, which is I think what makes the game compelling. Although it can like rub people who are optimizers the wrong way, just because like I had that king die and then his son died very soon thereafter, and I guess I'm playing like my nephew, and he's lost most of his holdings because like the early game inheritance does like splits among brothers, and so I guess I have to go like conquer my brothers again, and then I screwed up I screwed up something because I got they sieged, even though I was clearly going to win the war, they managed to capture me by sieging the capital, and I was like, well fuck, right? And then like that was like 6 hours later, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm done with the save, but I had a fucking blast, and I love it. And I'm gonna probably jump into it again sometime soon. There's an expansion coming out this year that I'm excited for. So yeah, that is absolutely the best game I returned to in 2021. Bitter Kings 3.
Man, the best game I returned to. This one's interesting. just because I feel like I don't actually have a lot of good abilities to answer. Hold on. Let me like there are a bunch of games that I returned to. I'm sorry. I'm such a fucking idiot. There's an amazing answer for this that I didn't think about until I just looked at my Steam recently played list. The Mass Effect Legendary Edition,
Yeah,
right? Holy fuck, is playing Mass Effect great. I it's so good. It boggles my mind sometimes, right? And I do sometimes wonder, like, when are these things going to lose their, like, when are they going to lose their magic, right? Something that I watched a YouTube video on New World recently. A guy that covers a lot of MMOs, his name is like Josh Strife Hayes or something like that. He made a whole video that just like put out the timeline for kind of, it's called New World Timeline of a Failure, right? New World had 1 million players at launch, and now it has less than 100,000. 94% drop in its player base, right? And he just laid out exactly like what were the steps to that failure, right? And the thing that he ends up saying in his kind of conclusion to the video is that he predicts New World is going to be like Avatar, right? The 2010 movie, the James Cameron movie, which sort of the famous hot take of which is, Avatar had no cultural impact, right? Like it didn't leave a footprint, right? It just kind of fades into the cultural memory to the background. And even though it was the hugest movie of all time, for 7 years running, it just kind of faded out, and that's it. And I do sort of wonder like what that's going to look like for games, right? Mass Effect is a game that was huge in its time, right? But it had the third sequel everybody famously hated, even though it's really good. Andromeda everybody famously memed to death, even though I would also say that one is really good, right? And it's just like, is that a result of the magic coming off, like the shine coming off the apple or whatever, right? And the answer is fucking no. Mass Effect 2 is still like the greatest game ever, right? Just like, the storytelling is so deep and it's so effortless, right? Um, that coming back into it, and it was so easy to sink into, for a game that came out just like in the middle of like June or July, that I was I don't know. I was really happy about it. I will say that this is something of a competitive category, which was why I was a little bit. I had a hard time answering because I've returned to a lot of games over the course of this year. Right. I returned to Valhalla. I returned to Skyrim. I returned to Hearthstone. After not playing for a year, so like I've definitely come back to a bunch of different titles. I've returned to, how many times have I returned to Total War Warhammer 2 over the course of this year? It's released 4 DLC packs, so that's at least 4 fucking times, right? But the one that definitely hit me the hardest was going to be the Mass Effect Legendary Edition. So yeah. Okay. Uh I teased I teased this one, so I just want to follow up on my twofer. So F9 was my pick for the movie that affected me most this year. Um, but I do want to take a minute to ask the question, to propose the category of just raw best film this year. What film was good, right? What was the film that was most good? Um and this answer also surprised me. My honorable mention probably goes to Dune, which I think maybe if you had asked me a week ago, I would have said Dune. But just like something kicked in the back of my mind 5 days ago, and I haven't been able to kick it out, which is that the best movie I've seen this year is The Many Saints of Newark, the Sopranos story. I think The Many Saints of Newark is probably an unpopular pick. I don't actually think it was very well reviewed. It was maybe well reviewed, but like fans probably didn't like it. I saw a lot of mixed stuff going on with The Many Saints of Newark. Which is maybe because it's a prequel story that doesn't as much tell the origin story of Tony Soprano as people wanted it to, right? Tony Soprano is famously one of these like incredibly deep, complex anti-hero villains, right? He's one of the characters that made that archetype that would later go on. We would get Breaking Bad, we would get BoJack Horseman, right? We would get Cersei Lannister, Rick Sanchez, right? A million of these kinds of like very motivated anti-heroes that have clear, concise reasoning for the things that they are in fact doing, right? But they are emotionally complex, right? They are not just villains for villain's sake. They have a deep and rich inner world going on, even as they are doing repugnant things, and that makes them that's a really compelling mix, right? To see a really motivated character who wants to do something really bad, but they have that complexity that you would typically associate with, like, like a protagonist or whatever, right? Tony Soprano is one of those characters, and this movie is his origin story, right? But the thing about it that I think people missed, and that I just want to say is fucking fantastic filmmaking, is that the origin story of Tony Soprano is told thematically through the character arc of Dicky Moltisanti, right? Because Dicky Moltisanti is Tony Soprano, right? They are the same character with the exact same, that emotional inner life that Tony has is the same emotional inner life that Dicky has, where he's trying so hard to be good, even though he is a mafioso, right? And he's racist, and he's misogynist, he's all these other things, he's willing to kill people at the drop of a hat, right? In the first act of this movie, he just bludgeons a guy that he cares for deeply to death, just because of how angry the injustice that guy was proposing was, right? And that's Tony Soprano through and through. And I think that that's like a fucking amazing thing, right? Imagine somebody coming in and pitching me a story that says, I'm going to tell the origin story of one of the most famous characters in 21st century television entirely via metaphor, because I'm going to explain the story of the guy that Tony most idolizes, right? And how Tony idolizing that guy turned him into the guy that we saw for for 6 actually seasons of The Sopranos. And I just think, and it's so good. And it probably didn't get the love that it deserved, which is maybe giving it a little bit of a bump in this category, right? But yeah, so my answer, best movie of the year, 2021, The Many Saints of Newark.
Awesome. Yeah, so I will say I have this category down on my sheet, and I'd given it to Inside. Uh, but there was another contender there, and so I'm going to talk about that movie instead, even though I think that Inside is the better movie. And that movie is a movie I watched very recently, and it's called Pig, starring Nicolas Cage.
Hmm.
Have you seen Pig?
No, I haven't, but I have heard things.
Okay, so this is super interesting because like the trailer makes it look like it's like Nick Cage, John Wick, right? It is not. It is a movie about loss and about dealing with loss, and it's like a much more kind of positive message ultimately than something like a John Wick. And the thing that stuck with me the most is there's this absolutely brutal and searing takedown in the middle of the movie. Nick Cage's character is a chef, and he's talking to another chef, and he basically, presses him down in a way that's like not aggressive or hurtful. It's like, or I mean, it's a bit hurtful, but it's meant to help the guy, right? Like it's meant to kind of like become a fuller self, and it's just like the best way I've seen that done. Especially because I think it knows it's playing against the expectation that everybody thinks is going to be a John Wick, and it's not. And in some ways, I think towards the end it becomes more like John Wick than you'd think. Just in a different way. I don't want to spoil too much of it because there's a lot going on in this movie. It's a movie about love. It's a movie about, like I said, loss. And it's pretty fantastic. And I recommend going into it without hearing much more about that. It's an hour and a half. It's on Hulu. If you have that service, so you don't have to worry about finding it. Like I wanted to see it in theaters, but I couldn't find it in a theater near me. It was only playing like AMC's near me. So I'll watch it on Hulu. And that 2 thumbs up. I'm curious. What have you heard good or bad things about Pig?
I've heard good things.
Okay.
People on my film Twitter liked it a lot.
Yeah, I was encouraged to watch it by my brother, who is not on film Twitter, but he is a film person. So
Yeah, I mean, people. There's always the the question of like Nicolas Cage, good or bad, right? Um, and I think this is evidence of, I don't know,
Yeah,
Nick
he can.
Cage good.
Yeah, Nick Cage can be good, right? Like, um, doesn't mean he always is, um, but he can be good, right? I guess that makes it my category. Um, and I think we're gonna go with uh, you have the words "good movie" Nick Cage not go together. You have not seen Face Off, obviously, which is a movie that is so bad that it is amazing. But the serious answer there is adaptation, which is a legitimately very good movie with Nicolas
Yeah,
Cage.
Raising Arizona is also a very good movie, and he's excellent in it. I think it's the Coen Brothers. Is it their first movie?
Is it really?
I don't know. Let me look.
Yeah, I need to go back and watch it then. I like the Coen Brothers quite a lot. I really enjoyed like Hail Caesar and Oh Brother Where Art Thou. Obviously,
Oh, excuse
bless
me.
you.
Okay. Yeah, let me take a quick look. Okay, never mind. They did a million things before Raising Arizona.
Yeah.
Actually, never mind. These are all shorts. So they did one feature before Raising Arizona called Blood Simple, which I've never heard of.
Yeah,
The owner of a seedy small town Texas bar discovers that one of his employees is having an affair with his wife. A chaotic chain of misunderstanding, lies, and mischief ensues after he devises a plot to have them murdered. That is a classic Coen Brothers plot.
Yeah.
Holy fuck. I feel like that could just that second sentence, a classic chain of or a chaotic chain of misunderstanding, lies, and mischief ensues after he devises a plot. That is every Coen Brothers movie. Maybe except for there God,
they've
not
got a
There
couple
Will
of
Be Blood.
serious ones like
Yeah, what's the one they won the Oscar for with
with the
Javier
cow gun.
Bardem? Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever that one
No
is
no
that I
country
can't
for old
remember.
men.
No Country for Old Men. Whoa. I mean, that was a book, so it's a little different, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Uh,
I think they have a
but
couple other serious ones too, because I brought this up to my brother at one point, and he pointed out a couple more too. They're in that kind of like serious Coen Brothers rather than like funny light Coen Brothers.
that's true. Inside Llewyn Davis is also like this. But yeah, I mean, when I think of Coen Brothers, I think of A Serious Man, Burn After Reading, right? Like, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Hail
Just
Caesar.
Hail Caesar. All these are all like great examples of like the classic Coen Brother antics.
Yeah. All right.
Fargo.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Moving on to the next category. Um. Best thing that wasn't as bad as everybody said it was. Um. And for me, that's going to go to Cyberpunk 2077. Because everybody shit on this game pretty relentlessly, and I enjoyed my time with it quite a bit. Apologies to Monik, friend of the cast, who I didn't believe for a very long time. But essentially, 2077, at least, so I will not discount that like playing an old generation system probably had a lot more problems, and I played it post the first couple of big patches, which shaved off the really rough edges, but it felt to me less like a big game with a lot of Eurojank, right? Which is, games like Euro or I Divine Cybermancy, games like, The Witcher 1, right? Like, and maybe we expect more out of CD Projekt Red just because they have been so big and so successful, and this game was sold to the hilt. But like, I think it compares pretty equitably with like Skyrim, right? In terms of like messiness that happens with an open world game. Um, and they do a lot of cool stuff with it. I had my problems with the game, and I still have yet to finish it, but like, there's a lot of cool stuff they did with the game that I really enjoyed. And I'm happy with the time I spent with it. And I might go back and finish it at some point, but like, I don't think I regret any of the time I spent with the game, which is more than I could say for some games. So, and I intentionally left this category broad as best thing that wasn't as bad as everybody said it was, because I figured there's some outs there for you if you didn't have that attached to a particular game.
No, I mean, the easy answer is WoW. I'm trying to think of something more complex than that, though. I went on like a 20-minute rant in our, what's it called, video about why people are mad at WoW and like the state that it's in. Like, that really,
We've
yeah,
had
it's
this rant
basically the
several
answer,
times
right?
over the past year. Yeah.
Yeah, it permeates like the I don't know. It just like permeates things, and it is like it is forever stuck in my craw, right? That the perception is so different than I feel like the reality of WoW. Something that I said the other day on the Reddit that I thought was, that I think is sort of like an insightful way to process this, right? Um, there's this understanding that like the story has been retconned, right? And that one of the books that came out, which tells the story of WoW lore kind of like from its inception, called Chronicle, right? There's 3 volumes of Chronicle over the course of the years, right? The idea is that Chronicle it's been WoW lore is so heavily retconned that Chronicle basically isn't even fucking canon anymore. Like it's just like toilet paper, right? And the writers are wiping their ass with Chronicle. And I pointed out to somebody in like the Warcraft lore subreddit, I said, here, like let's put this to the test, right? Go and open up any random page of Chronicle, right? And look for stuff that has been retconned. Show me the evidence that this thing has been retconned. And the answer is, even if we were to agree that the retcons that the community thinks are retcons that aren't really honestly super retcons, that would be like this tiny infinitesimal fraction of the overarching story of WoW, right? Just because we have deeper understanding about the lore now than we did in 2016 just doesn't mean that these things have been retconned and stuff. And it's just like, and I think it's that kind of hyperbole that rubs me the wrong way, right? On the top of the subreddit today, people are complaining about like, oh, Shadowlands systems are so bad, like the game is in such a bad place right now. But you can see people talking about specific aspects of the game, and it's like I'm looking at a ship of Theseus in motion. Or a ship of Theseus is kind of wrong. It's like the sum of its parts. If I were to take out each individual part of World of Warcraft and present it to a person and say, is this thing good, right? Almost everybody says, yes, this is good, right? If I were to say, the rare design in Korthia, or adding Valor to Mythic Plus, or, the seasonal affixes, like the dungeon portals in Mythic Plus, all these different changes, right? Most people would go, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that makes the game better. That's good. But then if I were to go, is Korthia good? They would go, no. And it's like, how is the thing bad if every individual component of the thing is good, right? Like that's the thing that's so frustrating, right? To deal with. And so that's the boring answer. I wish I had a better one,
I
but
think it's a
I
good
already
answer.
yeah, I mean, I already shilled really hard for the Many Saints of Newark, which is maybe the only other thing I can think of that got a poor reception, but I think is fantastic. So it's
Yeah.
WoW.
No, I mean, I again, I thought you might go with the Matrix on this one. I mean, I guess that movie's been more mixed than it is like everybody said was bad, but like
I think it might be a difference of also the people. The people on my Twitter fucking love it. Like, and like a lot of my friends, I feel like most of my friends that I have talked to in depth about the Matrix 4, they all really enjoyed it, which I think might just be a specific slice of things. For instance, I didn't see the Half in the Bag episode, but I saw that the thumbnail for the Half in the Bag episode was like head in hands, like, Rich or whoever. And I was like, oh, they probably didn't enjoy this as
no,
much
I
as
mean,
I did.
so what was it? So basically that episode, Mike Staklasa, was like, like this was bad and that was bad and that was bad and I loved every minute of it. Um, they both conditionally recommended it, so
Okay. Yeah, I mean, honestly, fair enough. Yeah, I just saw that. I just saw the thumbnail. But like the thing that I saw that like is the most cursed take is people saying that Free Guy is good and Matrix
oh
4 is
god.
bad. And so yeah, well, I mean, this is the thing. And so my Twitter is full of people making fun of that take more than it is full of that take. Which is maybe just like a version of the echo chamber, but I don't know. Yeah.
Honestly, that's the thing I don't understand the most about this fucking year, right? Is Free Guy. Is like how does everybody like I have heard so many people say that they love Free Guy. It's like a fun romp, and maybe I'm just too inside to really appreciate it, right? Like maybe this is like, the fucking astrophysicist watching Armageddon or whatever. But like it's just but it's your category.
Yeah. So, God, wait, where are we? I'm proposing a category now.
Mm.
Okay. I think I ran out of all my prepared categories, but I can think of one on the spot. Oh, this is actually a good one. Best, um, what would I call this? Uh, Diamond in the rough, which is to describe something from before 2021, right? That you discovered inside of 2021 for the first time, right? So sort of the inverse in a way of the Crusader Kings thing, right? Which is something before 2021 that you revisited, but this is something that I knew existed, right? Before 2021, and I just never put the time into it. But at a certain point this year, I just decided to go for it. And the answer to that one is Pathfinder Kingmaker, the CRPG. This is honestly one of my big highlights of the year. And it's a weird one because it came out 3 or 4 years ago, right? And I remember it coming out, and I remember people liking it, but I just kind of was in a different place at the time, and I had no interest in it. I think I had fallen off of a couple of other CRPGs, specifically Divinity Originals. I remember there was this trifecta of me doing Divinity Original Sin, maybe one of the Obsidian games, maybe like Pillars of Eternity 1, and then a third one. And it was just like, I remember I did 3 CRPGs in a row, and I just kind of bounced off of each of them, right? And I just like, I couldn't get my stride. And I really loved the CRPG genre, right? It's one of those genres that I played way back. I played the original the Baldur's Gate days, not the original one actually, the whatever the sequel is, that Baldur's Gate 2 3 is the one that is out now, right?
3 is the one that is currently in early access.
Okay. Maybe it was Baldur's Gate 1. It was one of the old Baldur's Gates, right? But it's just like, my computer wasn't very powerful. Baldur's Gate was a game that ran pretty efficiently on it. And I remember loving that game, even though I don't really remember actually the act of playing it all that much. And I remember loving that game and feeling like this is a genre for me, right? I should love CRPGs. But when I tried to get back into them, right, in that like 2016, 2017 eras, I just really bounced off of them. Then somewhere along the lines, I played Pillars of Eternity 2, right? I put a respectable 40 hours into Pillars of Eternity 2 before just kind of getting weighed down by sort of the, like the bloat in the story of that system, right? Where I was just like lost in this chain of side quests such that I had lost the main through line of the story, and I completed the side quest and I felt like I was done with the game, right? And then I got into Pathfinder Kingmaker this year because Wrath of the Righteous came out, and they had finally, a big thing for me was they had made a turn-based mode, which was what I wanted. I wanted a turn-based mode. So yeah, so I played Pathfinder Kingmaker. Oh, right, and the reason that I wanted that turn-based mode is because it uses the rules of Pathfinder so directly, right? It is such a one-to-one port that it was in this weird uncanny valley when I played it originally, where it was close to what Pathfinder was, but without them going round by round, that just like futzed with the mechanics in such a way that I fucking hated. I couldn't wrap my hand around it. So they integrated a full turn-based mode in like the full release of the game, right? And I was like, this is it. This is the moment I get into Pathfinder Kingmaker. And it was magical. I played that game hard. I went 80 hours over the course of 2 weeks in that game, where it just felt like every free moment I wanted to log in, and I wanted to, keep progressing my kingdom, and the stories and the companions, and getting deeper into the systems, right? One of the nice things about Pathfinder Kingmaker is it gave me this outlet to play characters and classes in the way that I have wanted to play multiple different Pathfinder characters over time, right? But I never had the opportunity to, because there aren't that many Pathfinder games, in my life that I can be a part of, right? So I was able to play dual wielding bastard swords Tonrik, who is a slayer that is taking advantage of ignoring prerequisites for the 2-weapon fighting feats so that I could get all this strength damage, right? And Tonrik ended up being a fucking monster in that game. And you can do that with all the companions too, because not only do you control your player character, you also control all these different companions, right? So you can make a kineticist, you can make a ranger, you can make a cleric, right? All of these different classes with these different sort of specializations, right? And that was just really fulfilling and really fun, and I had an amazing time with it. So that is my game, or not necessarily my game, but that is the thing, my diamond in the rough, something from before that I discovered this year.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you because you initially didn't say games, so I wasn't gonna go with the game because I didn't play. I don't think a ton of games that came out previously this year, but I am gonna say that my favorite thing for this, or my thing that fits for this, I think, um, is one of Philip K. Dick's lesser known stories. I think it's lesser known at least. That I like had found out about and listened to on tape this year, which is Clans of the Alphane Moon. I talked about this on the podcast when I listened to it, um, and it's a really insane story. And it has problems, but I think at the time I described it as like the living embodiment of like men writing women memes, but it is super super interesting and super easy to digest. It's like like it's like a couple hundred pages, I think. So it's it's relatively short. You can get through it. Um, and like just the way that like things interact with each other, and the characters talk to each other, and like the way things play out, and kind of the structure just really, really hooked me and made me jump into a couple other books of his. I also listened to "Flow My Tears, Policeman Said" and "The Three Stigmata" of Palmer Eldritch. Um, both of which I would also recommend. I think I like them in reverse order of the way the order I listen to them, which is I liked Clans of the Alphane Moon the most, Three Stigmata second, and then Pull My Tears, Policeman Said the least. But I didn't dislike it. And that really kickstarted for me like this whole trend of like listening to like this like classic sci-fi, which also started a couple months before in 2020, which was another great book, which is The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, which I didn't think, which is not very obscure. So I've been listening to Heinlein, I've been listening to Philip K. Dick, and that's what launched me into Hyperion with Dan Simmons, or by Dan Simmons. It's kind of like this kind of like sci-fi canon. I think I'm gonna do Snow Crash soon because I haven't I read that one yet. That and Neuromancer, just like you know, and maybe this counts as a diamond in the rough. Is going back to books, right? Like because it's the thing I hadn't done in a long time. It's just been a lot of like video games and YouTube and podcasts. But audiobooks are basically a podcast that aren't anchored to like current events. Not that all podcasts are, but like that's most of the ones that I listen to. So, yeah, I'm gonna give it to Clans of the Alphane Moon by Philip K. Dick.
That's a good one.
We're at
Okay, so we're at time. Are we gonna keep going, or what do you want to do?
I've got one more that should be short. It's kind
Okay.
of cheesy. I'm gonna say favorite thing from the podcast from the past year. And mine's gonna be a little bit more general. And it's gonna be streaming these lives. I think it's been a huge improvement. We've definitely seen the increase in the numbers. So thank you guys at home for listening and watching. It's been great interacting with people. From everybody from the most recent kind of King Fod dropping in. Thank you to the regular appearance of Aluria. Thank you for watching. I just think Twitch has made this podcast much better and much more fun. Yeah, so that is my favorite thing from the podcast is that's moving this to Twitch live stream along with the video and audio.
God, this one's actually really hard because I feel like there have been a lot of really good I feel like there have been a lot of really good podcasts this year. Some highlights that I do want to pick out is when I was like going through them. Right, this is the year that we did a Samurai 7 podcast, which I thought was great. That was honestly one of like obviously it's the one I like the most. But I just felt like that podcast had like a lot of insight in it, right? And it's one that I'm really like proud of. The same thing with we did the Young Justice 1 and 2 podcast this year, which I also thought were really insightful. Maybe man, just looking at it, what do I think? What do I want to? I don't know. Part of me just wants to say that first 20-minute rant from the fucking anniversary episode. It just so it so clearly got so many of my thoughts all collected together. No, actually, I'm lying. The real thing that I want to highlight is the Matrix trilogy of episodes. I think those are the best episodes we have ever done, just from like a technical, like insight perspective, right? If you want to come to this podcast to listen and learn about media in a more comprehensive and complex way, I think that those 3 Matrix episodes that we did were so comprehensive that I don't know, that they were just great, and I'm really proud of those, and I think that we did a really great job.
I think we did a great job too, buddy. Yeah.
I don't want to pat myself on the back
Yeah.
too hard, but
I think we'll keep the podcast going for another year.
Yeah, maybe we'll give it one more year.
All right.
Well. And Mango, please to the audience. Buddy, when did I sound the best? To be clear, I think I probably would have also said that we started streaming these if Mango hadn't already said that. I say completely co-opting the fucking answer, right? My favorite thing is the fans, right? In terms of like, if the podcast is a service, right? If the podcast is something that someone is tuning into for a good reason, I feel like those 3 episodes are the best reason to ever listen to our podcast.
Yep. I wonder if I have a favorite episode. I don't know. One didn't pop off the top of my head as like being particularly my favorite. I do like that 7 Samurai episode was like just like, so we saw like a tweet and we were like, let's do an episode on 7 Samurai. Yeah. No, yeah, no, it was a pretty good year. Although a lot of movies, not necessarily a lot of video games.
There were more games. Like, for instance, I forgot about Spellbreak, which is a game that I famously really enjoyed. We talked about it a lot and said that it was really smart and clever, and then like never played again. I actually played it with people from Akupara on an Akupara games night, which was a lot of fun, and I remember thinking that exact same thing at the time. I was like, man, I loved this game. We had a whole podcast about this game. Why don't I play this game more often? And then like logged into fucking World of Warcraft.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that is like it's in the Epic Games launcher instead of being in like Steam or the
honestly huge, right? Yeah, and also like I think games like that can get exhausted pretty quickly, because if they don't provide a really great sort of like ladder, like a great sense of progression, there's not a huge reason to continue onwards. And even if I did like the gameplay and everything else like that, something we did kind of talk about was this sort of leveling up battle pass progression system didn't really hit the right spot. So maybe that's it.
Yeah. Just one more thing about the podcast. I'm just staring at it now. It's like we did a double feature on Dear Evan Hansen and Carnage, which was that was a week for us.
What are you looking forward to most in 2022? I mean, that can be a real answer, but I'm just interested.
In terms of like media that we're gonna.
Yeah, because like there's Aquaman 2, there's the Batman, there's Warhammer 3, there's 9.2. I'm trying to think what's all the.
There is Elden Ring. And that is going to be the thing that I'm going to sink my teeth in.
Yeah, I mean, I told. Did I tell the podcast? I might have told somebody else. I might have been like in voice with somebody when I said I think this is going to be my first exposure to from software. Is I'm going to play Elden Ring. So.
Oh well,
that'll be something.
Podcast on it.
We will podcast on it. Yeah.
Oh, and in an ironic way, I'm very excited for Morbius the Living Vampire, because I think it's going to be trash. And I'm
oh my god, are we going to do Morbius the Living Vampire? Oh god, it does look like such garbage.
But yeah, that I'm ironically excited for. But those are actually the 2 things that came to the top of my head when you said it. What about you? What are your big looking forward to in?
I mean, Aquaman 2 is number 1, right? It has to be.
Yeah,
hold on. That is. I just want to make sure that it hasn't moved. Aquaman: The Lost Kingdom, I think is what it's called. Upcoming superhero movie. Yep. Okay. Scheduled for December 16th, 2022. Okay. Yeah. That is obviously my number 1 thing that I want out of 2022. But maybe actually the number one is Total War Warhammer 3. Ah, God, man, you have no idea how depressing it was going through the entirety of this holiday break without the ability to play Total War Warhammer 3. I remember when 2 came out in 2016. What is it, maybe 2015? Maybe. No, maybe it was 2018. I don't remember. It came out at some point, right? That I took some time off in the Christmas holiday, and I just binged it for hours and hours on end. And if 3 is anything like 2, and I get super fucking deep in this shit, you can better believe that it's gonna be like the highlight of my highlight of years. So I don't know. We'll see. Yeah.
Oof. Are you excited to see Moonfall?
Oh my God, is that the
That's the Roland Emmerich,
Roland Emmerich movie?
Chris Pratt
Honestly,
movie.
you know what? You know what's a weird hidden diamond, like diamond in the rough movie for me that I've been watching recently is Midway. I have seen Roland Emmerich's movie on Midway like 5 times because on HBO Max. I just kind of keep watching it as just like one of those movies to keep watching. It's just it's just a really well done fucking story. Fuck. Honestly, there's actually quite a lot in here that I didn't think about. Uh Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is in 2022. I didn't realize that Thor Love and Thunder is in 2022. One of the ones that I'm really interested in is Jurassic World Domination, which I think is finally delivering on the fucking promise of a Jurassic Park slash Jurassic World movie. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I'm
Apparently,
hype.
apparently, there's a movie coming out called The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, where Nick Cage plays himself, who has accepted $1 million to go to a massive fan's birthday, who turns out to be a drug lord, and he needs to channel his old characters to escape, which sounds like the most insane thing. I'm instantly pumped for this now.
You know, I have to say, one movie that I actually really do want to watch is Dog, which is a movie I have seen in theater, or a trailer for in theaters a bunch of times, which just seems to be a movie about Channing Tatum and his dog. But I just find Channing Tatum to be so fucking charismatic, and I love him so much that I think I might just go see Dog, in February of 2022.
Do it. I am. It'll be
There's
2022.
actually way more coming out in
Yeah.
2022 than I fucking realized. Like the more I am looking at this like set of movies, Uncharted, which is a video game movie, the untitled Mario film is
Right.
slated for 2022 apparently. It doesn't even have a fucking title. It's coming out. The new Mission Impossible 7, another series of action movies that that film people tend to go absolutely buck wild for is in the same way that they do for the Fast and Furious franchises, Mission Impossible. I'm very interested in Avatar 2, even though it's going to get delayed for the 80th year in a row. So
Apparently, there's a fucking Shrek sequel, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, coming out.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I like Puss in Boots actually quite a lot. Have you ever seen Puss in Boots?
Nope.
It is a honestly legitimately really good movie. Um Antonio Banderas obviously is
Yeah.
is
There's a Knives Out sequel coming. Huh. Oh,
I guess so.
I guess he's just a detective. Is the same character, which makes sense. Right? Because there's a sequel to the fucking Hercule Poirot movie coming out.
Oh, that also looks awesome. I mean, it's Kenneth Branagh, right? But it looks awesome, and I'm probably going to see that movie too. So
Did you see Murder on the Orient Express?
yeah, and it was good,
It
and
was fun. Yeah.
I was surprised. I honestly, the one movie that I haven't seen this year that I really want to is West Side Story. Is the Steven Spielberg West Side Story, and it's because I ran out of like free movies on the AMC premiere whatever thing because we saw Matrix and Spider-Man and something else.
Did you
That I don't
cancel?
remember.
Did you have to like spend one of your tickets canceling?
Oh,
Spider-Man?
maybe I spent one of my tickets to cancel and reschedule Spider-Man. Yeah, that must have been it. So I didn't have a third one. I was gonna go see what's it called over the break, but I don't know. It'll probably be in theaters in in January.
Yeah. All right. Now that we've dragged this out an extra 15 minutes, I think we could call it. If you'd like to email us about any of the things we talked about on this podcast, your favorites of the year, you can, or just with questions or whatever, you can email us at podcast@subdersplaygames.com or subdersplaygames@gmail.com. You can follow us at twitch.tv/subdersplaygames. These go out live. We have a YouTube, we have a SoundCloud, which is where the podcast is also hosted. Rate, review us on all the podcast apps. We're there. We're on Spotify. We're on iTunes. We're on YouTube. Although the last episode's delayed because I have to cut out the first 20 minutes since we talked into nothing. What else? I think. Oh, I think that's it for me, buddy. You have anything you want to promote?
I don't think I have anything to promote. So until next time.
All right. Well, in that case, until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.